I'm working on a bag project, and this right here is the flap of my bag that's going to go over the top and secure with a button. So I need a buttonhole in this flap in order to close it with a button. So how do we do that? Buttonholes are actually really quite simple. They seem scary, but they're really not that difficult. The first thing that you need for your buttonhole is you need a button. Your buttonhole is made based on the size of your button. So we're going to measure our button and do a couple of things here and draw out our buttonhole, okay? So this is the button I've chosen for my bag. So what I'm going to do, adjust my camera here so you guys can see a little better. There we go. Okay, so there's two measurements I need to take of my buttonhole. So the first one is I need to see how wide it is. So this button, just put it on my ruler. It is, let's see, it's 5, that's 3/4. This is 3/4 of an inch in diameter, okay? So for all the way across, it's 3/4 of an inch. So my buttonhole isn't actually 3/4 of an inch. It's slightly more than that. So we measure how wide our button is and how tall it is. So we're going to measure this way and then this way and add those together. So let's see, how tall is this button? This button is about 1/8 of an inch tall. So 3/4 of an inch plus 1/8 is going to put us right there at 7/8. Okay? We want we want our buttonhole to be as wide and as tall as the button is so that the button can slide through. Okay? So we know how big our buttonhole is, so now we just need to mark it on our fabric. Before I do the buttonhole on this flap, it's always a good idea, especially if it's been a while since you've done a buttonhole or if you've never done one, to grab a scrap piece of fabric and do a couple of tests at the right size just to get a feel for it before you actually work onto the main fabric. Because seam ripping a buttonhole is very, very difficult. So always test on a patch of scrap fabric if it's been a while, just so that you don't mess up your actual project. Okay? So with my ruler, I'm just going to use a washable marker. For your projects, you're going to want to use a pencil or something else that removes easier. I'm just using this so that you can see it on camera. So this scrap of fabric is actually 2 layers of fabric that I've folded together. Because when we're doing buttonholes, it's usually through multiple layers of fabric, and you'll want to practice with something that's similar to the same weight of whatever your project is. So I'm just going to draw a line that is 7/8 long, because that's what we calculated for this button. Right, so there's my line. I personally, just because it makes it a little easier, I'll put a little tick mark at the end of the line, at the start and stop, so that I can easily see where I'm going to start and stop. Okay? So there is the line I'm going to be stitching on. Now with our shop machines, they come with these regular presser feet, and you can totally do a buttonhole with this presser foot. I'm actually going to show you how to do it with this presser foot because not every machine has this foot, which is called a button foot. Okay? If your machine has this one, this is great to use. All you do is you just pop this one off, pop this one on, and it makes it go a lot easier in the process, okay? But not every machine has this foot, and some of you may need to be doing buttonholes at the same time. So I'm going to show you how to do it with a regular foot, because you can. All right, so I'm going to pop this back on. Now, before we start sewing our button foot, we've got to change some of the settings on our machine. So let's look up here at our machine. You see these markings right here? These are the buttonhole markings. These sewing machines use a 4-step buttonhole technique. Different sewing machines have different techniques, but for our lab, this is what we use. You can see they're all labeled A and a number. So A1 is the first one you do, and it's going to go down this side of our line. A2 is going to go across the bottom of our line. A3 is going to go up this side, and A4 is going to go across this way. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my stitch selection to A1. And the other really important thing that you need to do is over here in our stitch length, see between 1 and 0 how it looks, these little rugged edges that look kind of like this? this is our buttonhole stitch length. We want to put it halfway between 1 and 0 in this little range right here, okay? So our machine is now set and ready to go. So I'm going to slide this in and adjust my camera. Try to get in here really close so you can see exactly what's happening pretty clearly. Okay? So A1 is going to go down this side. So I'm going to start with my line right in the middle of my presser foot and that cross mark right in the middle of this opening on the top of the presser foot. Okay, on the buttonhole foot, you'll just start there with the presser foot, buttonhole foot mostly this way. Okay? Actually. So if you're using your buttonhole foot, you start with the buttonhole foot in this position because it's going to travel down that way. Okay? So I've got my presser foot down, and then I just sew. And it's going to go slow and small. Go slowly because you don't want to cross over your line. You want to go right beside it. Okay, I'm back at my tick mark. So I want to stop right here. Before you change your settings to A2, make sure your needle is up. You never want to change your stitch selection while your needle is down. Okay, so I'm going to change my stitch selection from A1 to A2. Okay, now at this stage you just want to do a couple of stitches across. If you do a bunch of stitches for this one, when you start to go backwards, it's going to get caught on the presser foot. So just do a few stitches, like 5. There we go. That's plenty. Make sure my needle is up. Change my stitch setting to 3. Come back down. Now this time it's going to go on this side of my line and the fabric's going to come towards me. So it's like we're reversing. You're not actually pushing the reverse button. It's going to do it automatically. See, I did actually make it a little big, so I'm going to have to pull my fabric a little bit because it's starting to get caught on the presser foot here. So I just pull it gently till it goes over. Let it do its thing. Alright, now I'm back at the top at my tick mark. We're going to switch up to A4, which is the same as A2. I'm going to switch back up 1 notch. And now it's going to go back and forth over the top. Okay, so just a few stitches like last time. Now, personally, I like to go back and do step 1 again, just to make sure that there's no gaps between this top stop and the side. So I'm going to do that. There we go. Just a couple of stitches. Pull it off. And look, we have a buttonhole. Grab my scissors. Trim your threads. Alright, so now we have a buttonhole. What this does is it's going to keep the fabric from fraying when we have a hole in the fabric here. But one problem with our buttonhole. This button's not going through here because we haven't cut through the fabric. So we want to cut through the fabric now. You can use your seam ripper to kind of poke a hole and rip this open a little bit. I really don't recommend using that method because it's really easy to accidentally cut the threads here on the end, and we've got to keep these secure. So what I personally like to do is I will fold my buttonhole in half, and I feel it as I go. I make sure that it's exactly on top of itself. I use my smaller scissors because they've got a finer point. I just do a little tiny snip right between the layers. You see that? See that little tiny hole? Get up here. So there's a little tiny hole there, just enough that I can stick my scissors into and finish cutting this open. And I'm cutting very slowly and very carefully because I don't want to cut any of the stitches I've just made because that's going to keep our fabric from unraveling. Okay, there we go. Now we have our open hole, and we want to make sure that it works by feeding our button through, and it goes through beautifully. Excellent, perfect buttonhole. So now I'm ready to do it on my actual piece. Whenever you're doing buttonholes, you always want to make sure that you do the buttonhole and then the button, okay? It's much easier to find the placement of the buttons after the buttonhole than the other way around, okay? If you have to choose between seam ripping and changing the placement of a button or the buttonhole, you want to change the button, because this is a very difficult to rip out. And once you've cut this buttonhole open, you have a cut in your fabric that you can't really, that you can fix, but it's going to be a messy, visible fix. All right, so that's how to do buttonholes. Now I'm ready to go do it over here on my project.